A simple egg-based pasta dough is a skill all home cooks should have. Here's how I make mine. Let's dive into this. So I realized I've never taken you guys through how I make my homemade pasta dough. So here's how I start it. It's 00 pizza flour. You can use all-purpose flour if you want, but I don't really recommend that. We're going to need 200 grams of it. For every 100 grams of flour, we are going to use 1 egg. If you don't have a scale, I definitely recommend grabbing these. This thing is like $9 on Amazon. I'll link it below. But otherwise, there are ways, and I'll talk you through it to just make sure you're getting the right consistency. But a scale is really, really valuable in this situation. The other thing I really recommend doing is pass it through a sieve or any sort of strainer like this, just to make sure you get the clumps out prior to starting this process. It'll save you a whole lot of time, and you'll get a much better end result. I'm going to use a small bowl here to make a little well here in the center. I'll push it out with my hands a little bit just to make sure we get the maximum amount of space. And then I'm going to crack both of these eggs into that same bowl. I like to pre-whisk them. You can pour the eggs right in there, completely whole, right out of the shell. But I do think this will make your life a lot easier. So just pre-whisk those, and then we're going to pour them right into that little center gap that we've made earlier. The next step is completely optional. I like to add 1 little squirt of olive oil. This is probably like a tablespoon worth at most. You don't need to do that. We're also not going to salt this. We're going to salt the water when we cook the pasta. And now we're going to just grab with a fork just the outsides of this ring. I'm sure you've seen lots of people do it, and we're just going to keep mixing it, incorporating little bits of flour at a time, over and over, until you get a really, really nice consistency. Also, check out this new angle. Let me know what you guys think about that. But just keep pulling it until you get almost like an oatmeal consistency, like that right there. And then at that point, you could really start to kind of mess up the walls, bring in as much of that flour as you want. Since this egg isn't super liquid anymore, you don't need to worry about it running away on your board, so you could just really mess this up. I'm going to grab the bench scraper, just kind of work through it a little bit, and then I'm going to dive in there with my hands. You could start to really put this into a nice dough ball at this point. Let the little straggly bits fall off if you aren't able to connect them. That's totally fine. If you don't have a scale, this is the point where I would say you use a little extra flour and just feel that dough to make sure it's absorbing the flour. The second it stops absorbing, even in my case here, I'm going to move the flour off here with my bench scraper. It didn't need all 200 grams of flour. It's either the humidity in the air or the dryness or the size of the eggs, but you just want to make sure it's not wanting to absorb any more flour. And now I'm just going to work this a little bit for maybe about 3 to 4 minutes. Then at that point, we're going to take it, we're going to wrap it in some cling film, and we're going to leave it sitting out on the counter for 15 minutes. The only thing I like to do is just give my hands a little squirt of olive oil and coat this dough ball, just to make sure at this stage it's getting real nice and hydrated. You don't need to wrap it up any special way also, just really kind of cover it, and now just let this sit 10-15 minutes, and then we're going to restart the process. Here we are after about 15 minutes. I'm going to throw down just a little extra flour just in case this dough is looking to soak up a little more. But as you can see, the color's changed. It's deepened a little bit. It's a little shinier at this point. And we're just going to take it out and we're going to work it again. I'm just going to push it, pull it. You could make any sort of pattern you want here to knead. The second kneading for me is not really the most important one. The third one I like to do is important. I could tell my dough though was feeling a little bit dry, so I put a little bit of water on my hands and I started to work the dough. If it feels like it's too dry, do not be afraid to give it a dash of water or olive oil or anything else that you have around. One of the most important parts of this is just making sure your dough is properly hydrated. So really pay attention to that, and you'll get that feel for it over time. But this is exactly what I want that dough to look like. You can tell it's a little paler. I'm going to put this into a nice little ball again. We're going to give it another little squirt of olive oil. I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to let this sit out for another 15 minutes before we come in here for the very last kneading. 15 minutes later, you can tell it's nice and squishy. That's what you're looking for. The gluten has developed beautifully. And now this is when I start to change a little bit how I knead it. You can see it's nice and shiny. It is very moist, which is good. You want that. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to literally stick my thumb into the middle of it and kind of fold it over my thumb. That way you're kind of keeping an outside roundness to the ball at all time, which will help you really push air up into the dough, and it'll help you maintain that nice round dough ball shape. I'm going to do this for around 3 to 4 more minutes. You can't really overwork pasta dough, so definitely err on the side of really working it rather than underworking it. But that's what you're looking for. That is beautiful. It's shiny. Everything you want is in that dough ball. I'm going to wet the bottom a fraction just to make sure these little pieces come together and don't separate. But then we're going to wrap it up one more time. This time I'm going to do it slightly tighter just so there's no real air in there. We're going to cut off that cling film and we're going to throw this into the fridge. You could do it overnight if you want, but I'm going to wait about 6 hours and then this will be used for my dinner tonight. So anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. Here we are 6 hours later. This dough is looking great. It's definitely firmed up. It looks beautiful. It looks shiny. It's hydrated. That is exactly the quality you're looking for there of your dough. I'm going to cut this open and show you what the inside should look like. It should be very much one consistent look like that. You might see little holes, which are perfect. Those are the air pockets you've created by kind of forcing air into this dough. And it should feel fairly firm, especially as it's cold. But now we're going to roll this pasta out. I'm going to put a little bit of flour onto my board, and I'm going to try to flatten this down as much as I can. Total disclaimer too is try to make sure you have a counter that can fit your pasta maker. My pasta maker here cannot clip onto my counter, so I had to clip it right to my cutting board, which is a disaster. It moves all over the place. But start at the largest setting of the maker. We're going to run it through once. I'm going to fold it over itself there in kind of 3 sheets, and we're going to fold it through one more time on that biggest setting. That kind of laminates the dough and was what you're looking for. And then we're going to run it through all the way to the second thinnest setting you have. If you want to do like an angel hair, you'll take it all the way to the thinnest. But when I get around the 4th size, 2 or 3 before, I'm going to cut it in half just because they're starting to get a little bit long, and we're just going to run these 2 separate sheets through. Make sure you're just really trying to keep it nice and straight. If it gets bumped up against the sides, it might kind of screw up your dough. So just pay attention, run it through slowly, but that's what you're looking for. It's beautiful. Do that with both pieces. And now I'm going to run it through the cutter. You could do this by hand if you want, but my machine has this little cutter on the other side, and it'll make a nice thick kind of fettuccine shape. There's a thinner linguine kind of angel hair size as well. But just run this through. If you want to cut it by hand, be my guest. And then I'm just going to lay them out, add a little bit of flour on them, and that's it. You're done. If you want to store this in your fridge for a few more hours, you can, or you could just cook it right now and it's ready to go. This is so easy. It was also about half of that dough, as I showed you, which is about 100 grams of pasta, and this is perfect for one portion. Little bonus here, I'm going to show you how I cook it. I'm going to throw a good amount of salt into a pot of water because this is the only time that pasta is getting salted. I'm going to do kind of like a light real Alfredo sauce here. So I'm going to throw 4 tablespoons of butter. You want to really make sure the sauces fit the pastas. This isn't a sauce that I would recommend. I have done it on this channel, but I think a real Alfredo sauce suits a homemade pasta like this. So we're going to throw that in right before it comes to a hard boil. I'm going to mix it up. I'm putting it in 2 batches. That way they don't stick together. But you can see that color change immediately. And now for the first like 30 seconds, I like to really move them. This pasta has a tendency to stick to itself. So you want to just move it. And cook this for 3 minutes. Once it's done, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to throw it in with the butter and a little splash of that pasta water. And we're going to try to make a little sauce first before we add any cheese to this. But this is like I showed you that OG Alfredo sauce that doesn't use any cream. This is perfect for this type of noodle. It'll soak it up. It'll coat it beautifully. Sauces like this are perfect for homemade. I don't think homemade pasta is great for like a red sauce or things like that, or a cacio e pepe. But this is perfect, in my opinion, for this sauce. Add that cheese in, mix it, add a lot of air in there so it emulsifies real quickly. Add a little more cheese. I ran this through the box grater, so not just your regular grater. That way it was a little thinner and it could melt into that pasta quicker. And you're good to go. Super easy. Once you make that pasta, this actually comes together from the time you're cooking it to the sauce in maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So if you're making large batches of that pasta, you could have dinner ready rapidly. Throw that out now onto a bowl. I heated this bowl up also because this sauce loves to seize up if it gets cold. So make sure your bowls are nice and warm, or your plate, or whatever you're plating it on. I didn't want to dirty up my other grater, so I just used my box grater here to get some of that cheese onto the plate. But just look at that. It's beautiful. That eggy kind of yellow look to that pasta is delicious. The sauce is perfect. This pasta has a real nice bite to it, and it is really absolutely fantastic. So give this a try if you haven't made your own homemade pasta. You'll be amazed by it. It is so good.